Hey folks, back with another video. Let's dive into what stories got my attention today. Starting with Afghanistan, an Afghan journalist working for the US funded Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty Network was killed in a blast in southern Afghanistan on Thursday. Alias Dai, 33, was traveling in Lashkargah, the provincial capital of Helmand province, when a quote, sticky bomb attached to his car went off, a spokesman for the provincial governor said. Radio Liberty's chief editor Ratib Nouri told the AFP news agency that the journalist had been on his way to the local press club. Three others, including Dai's brother and a child, were involved in the explosion. Now, there was no immediate claim of responsibility for the bombing. Dai's death comes just days after former television presenter Yama Siavash was killed in a similar bomb attack in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Helmand province has seen intense fighting between the Taliban and government forces in recent weeks. Taliban militants last month launched a broad offensive in a bid to take Lashkargah, prompting thousands of people to flee the city. The group has also stepped up its attacks on targets such as rights activists, politicians, and journalists. Now, Afghanistan has to deal with the Islamist terrorist ideology head on, along with the rest of Muslim leaders. Both political and intellectual leaders have to deal with this. And until they don't deal with this problem, these kinds of attacks will persist. Moving on, Ethiopia's military has defeated local forces in the west of Tigray state, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said on Thursday, accusing his foes of atrocities during a week of fighting that threatened to destabilize the Horn of Africa. Airstrikes and ground combat have killed hundreds, and refugees flooding into Sudan stirred Ethiopia's ethnic divisions and raised questions over the credentials of Abiy, Africa's youngest leader who won a Nobel Prize in 2019. Now, of course, communications are down, and of course, media has been barred, so there is no independent verification on the status of the conflict. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, which rules the mountainous northern state of more than 5 million people, announced a local state of emergency against what it termed an quote-unquote invasion by outsiders. Abiy accuses the TPLF of starting the conflict by attacking a federal military base and defying his authorities, while Tigrayans say his two-year rule has persecuted them. The premier said some of his soldiers had been found dead in the town of Shararo, shot with their legs and arms tied behind their backs. Quote, this kind of cruelty is heartbreaking, end quote, he said. Now, he did not say how many bodies were found or provide evidence. Reuters could not verify his allegation, and there was no immediate response from the TPLF, which has accused federal troops of being quote-unquote merciless in bombing Tigrayans. Abiy has so far resisted calls by the United Nations and the African Union for a ceasefire and talks. His army chief staff, Birhanu Jula, was quoted by state-affiliated Fana broadcaster as saying that the federal troops' Northern Command had survived a 5-day siege and was recapturing places including Dansha, Humera Airport, and Baker. There was no immediate response to the accusations. The army said transitional rule would be set up in parts controlled by federal troops and urged local forces to surrender or fight the Tigrayan leadership. In a wider push against the TPLF, Ethiopia's parliament stripped 39 members, including Tigray regional president Debretsion Gebremikhail, of immunity from prosecution. And the government's newly formed State of Emergency Task Force for Tigray said about 150 quote-unquote criminal operatives for the TPLF had been arrested in the capital Addis Ababa and elsewhere on suspicion of planning terror attacks. Now, there are fears of reprisals against Tigrayan living around Ethiopia. Thousands thousands marched in an anti-TPLF protest in the Oromia, Somali, and Afar regions, according to the report by Fana, in what appeared to be a government-backed attempt to win the propaganda war over Tigray. Now, I don't believe that Ethiopia is out of the woods yet. I believe that these are just this is going to continue for some more time. Anyhow, I'll be keeping an eye on the issue as it develops. Moving on, several shots were fired at the Saudi Arabian embassy in The Hague early on Thursday, but no injuries were reported according to local media. Now, the bullet struck multiple windows around 6 a.m. local time and left 20 holes all over the building, police said in comments carried by broadcaster Omrop West. Police subsequently sealed the area around the embassy. They found bullet cartridges. Now, there was no information available about possible suspects or the motive behind the attack. While information is lacking in this case, these kinds of lone wolf attacks, I would presume, will continue from two sources. On one side is the Islamist terrorists, which are so many that every month needs a long list, and anti-Islamists, which there have been maybe one or two for in the past. However, so far the anti-Islamists have not done anything wrong, except from those one or two incidents. However, I believe the Muslim leaders they need they need to work this on. If they don't engage with the terrorists in a head-on sort of intellectual attack on the Islamist terrorists, and we can expect more such attacks. And possibly, if the Muslim leaders abdicate its responsibility on dealing with this issue, I fear that there might be anti-Islamists who might be roused to commit atrocities, small or big, and that would completely that would be a catastrophe that I believe can be avoided and has to be avoided. And in order to do that, it is time that Muslim leaders grow up and start acting like the adults that they are. And yeah, moving over to Libya, the political talks in Tunis on Libya's future have reached a breakthrough, the United Nations acting Libya envoy said on Wednesday, paving the way towards election within 18 months. The participants reached a preliminary agreement on a roadmap to parliamentary and presidential elections that includes steps to unite Libya's institutions, Stephanie Williams said at a news conference in Tunis. She said Tuesday's heinous killing of dissident lawyer Hanan al-Barasi in the eastern city of Benghazi showed there was a crisis of accountability across Libya. After years of chaos and warfare in Libya, with key institutions held by rival factions riven by political, regional, and ideological divisions, and of course foreign powers pouring in arms, many Libyans remain skeptical of peacemaking efforts. However, the Tunis talks, which began on Monday, follow a ceasefire agreed last month between the main warring sides, the internationally recognized Government of National Accord in the west, and the eastern-based Libyan National Army. Now, I am happy to find that Libya is going to progress, albeit slowly. Hopefully, a clean election will lead to a legitimate and strong democracy that would address the issues that the people have. And hopefully, once and for all, Libya can extract itself from the current crisis that it is facing. Moving on, as Hong Kong's legislature currently sits empty of pro-democracy lawmakers as of Thursday, after the bloc said that they would resign en masse, turning the semi-autonomous city's once feisty legislature into a muted gathering of Beijing loyalists. Of course, the threat was in response to the it was a threat trying to prevent four Hong Kong's legislators from being kicked out. Of course, the resignation came with the city's beleaguered pro-democracy movement and avenues of dissent already under sustained attack since Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law earlier this year. Wednesday's resignation by 15 pro-democracy lawmakers were in protest at the city's pro-Beijing government banning four of their colleagues from holding office. The four were disqualified in line with the resolution adopted earlier in the day by China's parliament authorizing the expulsion of any politician deemed a threat to national security. The resignations will leave just two legislators outside the pro-Beijing camp. The United States warned after Wednesday's move of further sanctions against China, which it said had flagrantly violated Hong Kong's autonomy. I believe Beijing is pushing Hong Kong, and sooner or later something is going to crack from which there will be no return. Let's just hope for the best. Well, that's it for this video. If you like the video, then hit that like button and hit that subscribe button for future updates. Write in the comments your thoughts, criticism, or anything I might have missed, and I will see you in the next video.